Hey everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of True Crimes. I'm your host Kayla, and today we're diving into the heartbreaking case of Leigh Occhi. Vicky Felton and Donald Occhi were both members of the military and crossed paths while stationed in California in 1976. Their relationship moved quickly, and after just a year of dating, they tied the knot. The couple was then transferred to a military base in Honolulu, Hawaii, where Leigh Occhi was born on August 21st, 1979. Unfortunately, their marriage didn't last, ending in 1981 with both citing irreconcilable differences. Donald relocated to Germany with the military, while Vicky left the armed forces and moved with Leigh to Tupelo to be closer to her family. Those who knew Leigh described her as kind and outgoing. She had a passion for horseback riding and was known for her deep love of animals. With her blonde hair and hazel eyes, she was well loved by her family. Despite living far from her father, she maintained a close relationship with him. One summer, she even traveled to Germany, where the two explored the country together. Later, when Donald was transferred to Arlington County, Virginia, father and daughter spent more time together, and he even taught Leigh how to shoot guns. On the surface, Leigh seemed like any other 13-year-old girl. She excelled in school, loved pizza, and even had a boy she was interested in. These ordinary details made the events of August 27, 1992 all the more heartbreaking. That morning, over breakfast, Vicky and Leigh discussed the upcoming school year and their plans for the day. Leigh was supposed to attend an open house at her middle school where she would soon start 8th grade. She planned to go with her grandmother that afternoon and then grab dinner at Taco Bell afterward. According to Vicky, nothing seemed wrong with Leigh that day. The only unusual circumstance was that this would be the first time Leigh would be home alone for the entire day from morning until being picked up in the afternoon. Vicky was cautious about her daughter's safety. She and Leigh had established a specific phone call pattern. Vicky would ring twice, hang up, and then call back so Leigh would know it was her mom calling. When Vicky heard the weather report and knew about her daughter's fear of storms, she tried calling home, but Leigh didn't answer. Vicky left work at 8:45 a.m. and hurried home to find the garage door open and the light still on, indicating it had been activated just minutes before her arrival. As she approached the house, she found the front door unlocked. When she stepped inside, she faced every parent's worst nightmare. Blood pooled in the hallway, splattered on the walls, and Leigh nowhere to be found. When investigators arrived, they found no signs of forced entry into the home. However, there were clear signs of a struggle. Blood was smeared throughout the hallway, bathroom, and on Leigh's bedroom door. A trail of blood led from the hallway to the living room, and there was blood and hair stuck to a door frame, suggesting Leigh had hit her head during the struggle. Blood in the bathroom appeared to have been partially cleaned up around the counter and sink. One of Leigh's nightgowns and her bra were found with bloodstains in her laundry hamper, suggesting to police that she had suffered an injury above the neck. This was further supported by a fist-sized pool of blood on the carpet. According to investigators, the evidence was consistent with someone of Leigh's height receiving a head injury and indicated she may have lain on the carpet briefly before being moved. Blood typing revealed the blood likely belonged to Leigh, but since DNA testing was still in its early stages, no tests could conclusively confirm it was hers. The two officers who initially responded to the scene spoke with Vicky, quickly recognized the urgency of the situation, and called lead detective Bart Aguirre for backup. Aguirre was teaching a fingerprinting course at the North Mississippi Law Enforcement Training Center that morning when he received the call. When he arrived at the house, he found Vicky and her estranged second husband, Barney Yarborough, a reporter, and the two responding officers outside the home. Besides the blood evidence, nothing else in the house appeared disturbed. The only items missing were Leigh's shoes, reading glasses, some of her underclothes, and a sleeping bag. Police began searching the area with dogs, covering a half-mile radius around the house that same morning, but the weather made it impossible for the dogs to pick up a scent. Despite extensive efforts, they found no trace of Leigh. Given that the front door was unlocked, investigators believed Leigh had opened the door to her attacker. Her family thought she likely knew the perpetrator since she wouldn't speak to strangers. Police couldn't determine if Leigh had left the house on foot or had been taken in a vehicle. Based on Vicky's timeline, they estimated the assailant had between an hour and a half to commit the crime. This meant they couldn't have gone far, especially since, according to Vicky, the light on the garage door opener was still on when she arrived home, suggesting she had missed the perpetrator by mere minutes. Investigators searched a 10-foot ditch alongside the property and then focused on a nearby wooded area. Along with this initial search, they spoke with locals, combed through vacant lots and overgrown land, searched the Knox landfill in Chickasaw County, and used bloodhounds to check the family's vehicles. Residents across Tupelo joined the effort, and aerial searches were conducted just a day later. Initially, they focused on places where Leigh might have hidden if lost or injured, but it soon became clear to everyone involved that they were looking for a body. 1 week after her disappearance, a $1,000 reward was offered, hoping it would encourage anyone with information to come forward. Just 2 weeks later, the amount was doubled. As months passed, investigators grew increasingly frustrated. They were certain Leigh had been a victim of foul play, but they continually came up empty in their search for physical evidence. Vicky, frustrated that police believed her daughter was dead, hired a private investigator to re-examine the case from the beginning. She also announced she was increasing the reward for information about Leigh from $2,000 to $5,000. About a month after Leigh's disappearance, her glasses arrived at her residence by mail. They were addressed to B. Yarborough. Leigh's stepfather was named Barney Yarborough, and he and Leigh's mother had separated shortly before Leigh's disappearance. The street name on the envelope was misspelled, and it had 6 stamps, twice as many as needed. Nothing else was included in the package. Handwriting and forensic tests on the envelope yielded no results. The stamps had been wet with water, and there was no DNA on the envelope. Aguirre believed the glasses were sent as a distraction. He stated, "There was no ransom letter or anything like that came with those glasses. It was just those glasses. You would think if it was an actual kidnapping, you would have expected a little more to come along with that." The sender of the envelope remains unidentified. It was postmarked from Boonville, Mississippi, a town about 30 miles north of Tupelo. A student working at a McDonald's drive-thru in Boonville reportedly spotted Leigh sitting in a truck driven by an African-American male. The man drove away before the employee could get a better look at her, but detectives later tracked down the driver who showed them the girl he had been with that day. She wasn't Leigh Occhi, and the man was cleared of any involvement in the case. 14 months after Leigh's disappearance, a farmer harvesting soybeans discovered a human skull in his field. He immediately called the police, who briefly examined the area but found no other bones. The skull was sent to the state medical examiner's office for identification, using dental records. Just 4 days later, authorities announced the skull did not belong to Leigh, but to a young adult woman between 18 and 30. A recovery team was sent to the area where the skull was found, and hours later they reported recovering the rest of the remains. Despite everyone's efforts to find the missing 13-year-old, they had no success. However, law enforcement had several suspects from the beginning. Rumors circulated that Vicky might have been involved. Even those who didn't believe she had committed the crime herself thought she knew more than she was telling police. Investigators had Vicky take 3 different polygraph tests, all of which she failed. Still, they hesitated to name her as a suspect. The tests were administered by officials from both local law enforcement and the FBI. Barney and Donald also agreed to polygraph tests, but passed and were ruled out as suspects. It's worth noting that polygraph tests have a history of inaccuracy, which is why they're rarely used as evidence and are generally not admissible in U.S. courts. Barney provided a solid alibi during his interrogation and was reportedly forthcoming and cooperative throughout the investigation. Donald obtained an emergency 1-month leave, after which he temporarily moved to Tupelo to help search for his daughter. According to Donald, Vicky initially downplayed Leigh's disappearance, giving him the impression she had simply run away. However, after arriving in Tupelo, he began to suspect Vicky might have been involved, fueled by local residents who told him to look closer at her mother. From the start, Donald believed Leigh was deceased and that someone had entered the home and fatally beaten her. Rumors of abuse at home circulated. Leigh reportedly came to school with bruises and even a black eye. When teachers asked about her injuries, she blamed them on horseback riding accidents. At a day camp, Leigh allegedly broke down crying at the thought of returning home, and neighbors gossiped about Vicky's ex, Barney, having locked Leigh out of the house at least once. Leigh had also confessed to being afraid of her stepfather. As weeks and months passed, more rumors spread about Leigh's disappearance. One claimed Barney had been abusive toward his stepdaughter, while another suggested a local doctor had abducted her and buried her in a barn. The latter rumor prompted investigators to issue a gag order, as they found the gossip was interfering with the case. Officers who breached the gag order faced a 2-week suspension. Despite all the rumors, Detective Aguirre felt Vicky's account of what happened the morning Leigh vanished was incomplete, but admitted it would have been nearly impossible for her to kill Leigh and hide the body. When the detective arrived at the crime scene, the blood was still fresh and hadn't begun to congeal, indicating it hadn't been there for more than about 15 minutes, and Vicky had been away from the house for over an hour. In the eyes of the police, this cleared her of being the perpetrator. Vicky had her own theory about who had taken her daughter. She believed a local man named Oscar Mike Carnes was responsible for Leigh's disappearance. He was a Sunday school teacher at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, which Leigh attended with her grandparents. He shared Leigh's love of horses and horseback riding and had asked if she'd like to go riding sometime. Vicky believed Carnes could have easily entered the house since Leigh knew him, making it simple for him to get in, perhaps using the weather as an excuse. In May 1993, 9 months after Leigh went missing, Carnes abducted a 15-year-old girl he had also met through church. He kidnapped her under the pretense of driving her to school, but instead took her to a field where he sexually assaulted her before dropping her off at school. Upon arrival, she contacted the police. Carnes was arrested and later pleaded guilty to his crimes. He received a 24-year sentence with 16 years suspended but served less than 4. He was released in October 1997. Shortly after his release, he kidnapped a married couple and sexually assaulted the wife. For this crime, he was sent back to prison. According to Vicky, he has also been linked to 2 other disappearances in the Tupelo area. Regarding Leigh's disappearance, Carnes has refused to be interviewed or take a polygraph test. He has never been charged in connection with Leigh's case. Leigh Occhi has been missing since August 27, 1992. At the time of her disappearance, she was 13 years old, stood 4 to 10, and weighed approximately 95 pounds. She had light blonde hair, hazel eyes, and a strawberry birthmark on the back of her neck. Each ear was pierced once, and she wore glasses for reading. Donald Occhi went to great lengths to ensure people wouldn't forget about his daughter's case. He distributed flyers to bus services, local businesses, and truck drivers. He sent Leigh's information to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and Child Quest. He even consulted psychics who all claimed a body of water was somehow connected to the case. Donald has since remarried and started a new family. He hopes Leigh died the same day she disappeared so that she didn't suffer. At the time this account was written, Leigh would be 42 years old. The case remains open. If you have any information, please contact the Tupelo Police Department or the FBI. Tips can also be submitted anonymously through Crime Stoppers of Northeast Mississippi at 1-800-773-8477. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a thumbs up because that really helps me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.